Hello, I'm Kelvin O'Shea. I'm a journalist, a TV producer, and occasional correspondent. My wife and the children think I just watch TV and play on the computer, which is absolutely fine because that's what I do most of the time. I've won a few awards, which is very nice, and I was told I had to mention that because I normally sort of push that to the back. I've been arrested twice, once in 1975 and again in 2008. In 1975, I was challenging the freedom of speech laws in the UK, and after a few hours of questioning by the police, I was allowed to go. In 2008, I was again challenging the freedom of speech laws, but this time in the capital of Iran, Tehran. We were using some state-of-the-art broadcasting equipment when some rather tough intelligence officers approached, and after about 6 hours of questioning and being accused of jeopardizing the work of the entire Western media, someone realized that there'd been a lack of communication between two quite important ministries, Irshad, the Ministry of Culture and Religious Guidance, and sadly, the Ministry of Information, which really aren't to be messed with there. So no word of apology, but I was given a tub of chocolate ice cream as recompense for any inconvenience. So the moral of that story is life can be a bit tough, but occasionally you're going to get arrested. I would like to thank the Sharjah Press Club because Huda has been absolutely wonderful. And if you want any information, there are loads of people from the Sharjah Press Club here, and it's a great little club to join. We were there yesterday, and it's a beautiful setting, amazing facilities, and friendly people. There was another brush with the law I had, or with the authorities. That came in 2005 on my first trip to Saudi Arabia. And I hadn't really brushed up or familiarized myself with the local security customs. I was snapping away on my personal camera for posterity and to show my family the amazing country I'd just visited when I became a little carried away at the airport, not realizing, of course, that it was a security zone. Men in uniform descended upon me, snatched my camera, and ripped out the film and threw it away. I was humiliated by the grinning soldiers. My lesson learned there was learn the local customs and security laws. The trip was very successful. We took some really lovely and wonderful pictures and wrote a beautiful script, found some stories which really resonated with our viewers. The great thing about being a TV producer is that you can surround yourself with talented people, charismatic reporters, incredible cameramen, and basically you just keep on making coffee and make sure they get the upgrades on hotels and airlines. That Saudi trip was also a success because the de facto ruler, Crown Prince Abdullah, personally invited us back, which was the beginning of a great relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I returned to London and was just handing in my expenses when the head of foreign news said, "Well done, here's a challenge, Syria." Until then, only one American TV crew had been allowed into Damascus. So this really was a challenge. And it did take a few months of writing to the Ministry of Information in Damascus, visiting the embassy in London, and listening to almost every lecture by visiting dignitary and diplomat and politician who came from Syria to London. It worked. As always in this business though, you aim high and prepare to make concessions. We were granted 4 visas: correspondent, cameraman, satellite engineer, and me. It was going well. All okay, I asked? Yep, no problem, said the voice in Damascus. Flights were booked. More than a dozen cases were packed with all the equipment. It was an early flight, so we booked the taxi the night before, as you do when you're sort of moderately organised. And yes, the phone rang again. There was a problem. We could not take the satellite dish or the engineer. I had a rant, I had a sulk, and a think. I rang back and asked if we could use their dish. We would have to ask the minister when we arrived. An hour after arriving at the Sham Palace Hotel in Damascus, we checked in with the Ministry of Information and was granted a meeting with the minister. I explained what had happened and what we wanted to do, and to show Syria to Sky News viewers. Syria, a rather secretive country which recently had a new president, Bashar al-Assad, who was educated in London, was married to Asma, who was brought up in the UK. The minister let us use one of his satellite, the one satellite truck that they had. It was brand new, it was amazing, state of the art. And what they used to do, instead of using a license, they just used to find an empty space on the satellite and use it. Whoops, clever them. But there was no generator and no license. So we had to resolve this problem. We didn't have the satellite. We wanted to have this amazing week of special programs. And without a license, we could not broadcast on the satellite which we used. In 3 days, we had to have a license for the uplink truck. And in 3 days, we got it. A job which usually takes 2 months. There are some amazing people in London, and together we got the Syrian TV truck to work. We broadcast from the Umayyad Mosque, the souk, the university, and the border with Iraq. Fantastic. On the final day, there was a little bit of a misunderstanding when the head of outside broadcasts, with whom we'd been working for the last 2 weeks, said to me, and it sort of lost a lot in translation, he said, "A piece of shit, what you did." And I said, "Pardon?" Because I really thought we'd done quite a good job. And he said, "A piece of shit, what you did." And I said again, "Sorry." But then he repeated it slowly and slowly. And he said, "I appreciate what you did." I said, "Thank you." It was really brilliant to cooperate with a country in its embryonic stage of using modern technology. Meanwhile, in Egypt, we were trying to get an interview with President Mubarak. We were almost there. In fact, we were there, almost. We flew out to Cairo, the same team who were together in Damascus. The Minister of Information wanted to have lunch, which is always ominous, because it means it's either bad news or they're going to lay down some more conditions. If they just want to say welcome, normally it's a cup of coffee. They wanted a full list of questions for the interview, which must not be changed at all, even by a word, during the interview. Were we allowed to have follow-up questions for clarity in case it didn't make sense? No. Reading out questions sounded stilted. Could we ad-lib? No. And so the bartering continued until the minister said, "I think you like it when I say no, Kelvin." That was a challenge. I started a new line of questioning because then I realized that I was starting not from where I thought we were, but I started right from the very beginning. And in the end, he said, "We'll see." And I thought, my foot is in the door, this is brilliant. And so we agreed a whole string of compromises. He agreed to everything, I nodded and smiled, and everything was wonderful. then the Israeli Prime Minister was taken seriously ill and we had to cancel, which is what happens. The so-called Pan Am bomber, the Libyan intelligence agent, Abdul Basit al-Megrahi, he was in prison in the UK. Eventually, he was given quite a nice prison cell in the north of the UK, in Scotland. And he was released. He was seriously ill, concessions were made, and he was allowed to fly back to Libya. The press followed, we all got our visas. I left with the cameraman from London. The correspondent was leaving from Rome, where for some bizarre reason, the Libyan embassy was closed until Monday. It was Thursday. We flew to Tripoli, the cameraman and I. We drove around, we broadcast live. I was acting correspondent. I'd always remember the trick for live broadcasts is to have one nugget of your own information and to speak to one person. I visualized my mother trying to understand what I was saying. It seemed to work. For 4 days, I reported from Tripoli, and applying the philosophy, if you don't ask, you don't get, I asked to speak to Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. It didn't happen, and we flew home. Then, on a Sunday evening, 2 weeks later, the phone rings. It's Colonel Gaddafi's advisor saying, the answer to my question is yes. He said, the answer to your question is yes. I didn't quite know what he was talking about. I said, when? He said, when do you want? I said, Friday. He said, okay. This is all very odd and a bit too simple, a bit too easy. I thought it was somebody joking or messing around. But they weren't. We arrived, and on the Saturday, were whisked in to see the great man. I couldn't really believe it. We set up everything. Gaddafi walks in. There were protests, as usual, about the questions, so much so that he was about to walk out until I said my mother was desperate for a photo of him and me together. And she was a great admirer of his from the 1970s. He relented, and the interview went absolutely brilliantly. We got some great press. You find that in the media, one aspect, one platform is always trying to be taken up by another platform. So you're trying to get quoted. So we on TV love it. And at Sky in particular, we loved it when the BBC picked up an interview and quoted us, or the newspapers quoted us. And on the Gaddafi interview, he was wearing a crazy outfit because at the time he was president of the African Union. And so he was wearing this camouflage outfit, which was brown and had little icons of Africa in green all around it. So not only did we get into the foreign pages, we were on the front pages, the political pages, and the fashion pages. It was absolutely wonderful. If you want to ask any questions, please do, because I may do things differently. I may have a different point of view to how you do things. Nothing is right, nothing is wrong. There are also so many misunderstandings about what the European or Western media wants from TV. Some people say we're rogues, we're like wild dogs just trying to get people in trouble. Maybe I'm too much of a goody-goody, because I always believe that you should give both sides of the story. Because in telling both sides of the story, both sides trust you. The audience trusts you, and in the end, you get a better program or a better report. And people pick you up, they trust you. I'm going to take a little sip of this. Please put your hand up and ask any questions if there's anything anybody wants to ask. Oh, a squabbling, I love it. What's your name, sir?
My name is Kayfan. I'm from the Gulf University of Science and Technology in Kuwait. I got a quick question. What are the ethical values that you see are missing during news outlets today?
Could you repeat that, please?
What are the ethical values that you see are missing in news today?
Ethical values. We have to remember that I come from a different culture. That's fine. I believe in transparency. I believe in freedom of speech. That doesn't necessarily mean you've got to dig into somebody's personal life and expose something which is private but doesn't really relate to their work. So, ethical values. Transparency and balance. So you have got to tell me everything that is important. If, say, there's, let's just say, a minister, not necessarily here or anywhere, and say they're in charge of roads, let's just, or restaurants, there we go, there isn't a minister for restaurants anywhere in the world. Let's just say he's a minister or she's a minister for restaurants. However, if they just happen to own a chain of restaurants, or they happen to own an agency which looks after chefs and catering staff, I believe that should be exposed, because then they could be open to corruption, they could be giving their own staff priority over everybody else. So it's not a level playing field. Freedom of speech, transparency, and balance. Yes? Sorry, I think I'm a bit tired. My eyes are going all over the place.
Okay, social media, how much impact does it have on the journalism in the UK or media in the UK and on you personally out of your experience?
Drones are wonderful. Again, they've got to be used responsibly. You can't have them flying over a nudist beach or something, because you're invading people's privacy. And really and truly, you can't have them flying over military bases, because military bases, by definition, are meant to be secret. However, I don't know if you've noticed the use of drones in the conflict in Syria. They actually show quite dramatically the horror and the damage, the destruction that has gone through in that fighting. Drones are also very good at keeping costs down, because in the olden days you would have to hire a helicopter, you would have to have a special camera, and they would fly around costing a lot of money. You can get a good drone for a couple of $1,000s, and you can attach some HD cameras on there, fly around, and take some beautiful pictures. So I'm in favour of drones, but obviously they've got to be used very sensibly. Now, social media, this is a very, very good question. Social media is good. Citizen journalism is good. But, and you've probably all heard of Donald Trump talk about fake news. We've got to be grown up. We've got to be intelligent, and we've got to use our brain a bit. If you see a report that you, Mohammed, have been getting up to mischief from just some random person, you're not going to believe it. It's just somebody who's got a vendetta against you. However, if, say, that same person then comes along and starts saying, I've got to try and be very clear here about some idea, but comes up with some gossip about the government, and he's the only person reporting that, again, you don't believe it. It's great entertainment. I look at social media, I look at forums, I look at Twitter, I look at whatever, because you get, it stimulates your brain. However, if you always fall back on your reliable source, if you always fall back on the New York Times, the Khaleej Times, the Guardian in London, to check everything that you've read, I believe you can use social media and citizen journalism to great effect, because it helps you question what is in the news. Somebody has an idea which perhaps you haven't thought about, and it enables you to have that question. But you must never believe what you read in social media or citizen journalism. Is that it? Yeah? Thank God. Now, hello. Hello, Miriam.
You're talking about freedom of speech. Since you got in trouble in your country, in your own country, so how can you manage this in the airport? Because some countries, they don't agree with the freedom of speech.
Well, that was a very subtle point I was trying to make, or a point I was trying to make subtly. Because I was first arrested in 1975, which was a long time ago. And since then, our rules have evolved, have changed. And I was going back to the first question. You have got to use, journalists have got to use their brain a little bit. Sometimes calling for freedom of speech for things that either don't really matter, or things that you think, well, actually, it's a good idea that they're kept secret so our enemies don't find out, is quite good. So it's good, but if, it's always good to, it's also good to question. So, if the opposition or if pressure groups say we should know more about something, traffic on the Corniche, and but if the government says no, you ask why no, and they'll say because. Well, you've then got to go back to being a parent, and sadly, because no is not an answer to children, so why should it be an answer to adults? So you say, please give us an answer. We're adults, you're adults. Give us a justifiable reason why we shouldn't know. And they'll probably say, I can't think of a reason, but they'll say, because again. And you say, that's not good enough. Please, you've got to give us, because if you give us a justifiable reason, our viewers and readers will understand. They will know why you've done this, why you've said no, and in the long run, they will have more respect for you, the government, because you're treating us like grown-ups. Okay? Hello.
My name is Basil Ahmed from Belgium University.
Hello, Basil.
Going back to your thought on social media, do you see social media overtaking Sky News, BBC, and other news organizations?
Well, what you're finding is a convergence. You have TV,
Be closer to the mic.
this one here.
Yeah,
I beg your pardon. I wasn't speaking close enough to the microphone, so please excuse me. There's a convergence of TV and newspapers. In the olden days, you had the newspapers, you had radio, you had television. Now, what is happening is that newspapers are getting into TV via the internet. TV is getting into longer form written works via the internet. And then they're using social media, if you mean Twitter and Facebook, to highlight, to headline, to publicize, or as they say in the trade, to push the longer articles. So Twitter is good, Facebook is good, Instagram is good, Snapchat is good. All these are ways of publicizing the greater article in online or on TV. What we found at Sky News was that 10, 15 years ago, the audience was almost uniform, but the main audience was between 25 and 50. Over 50, it went down a bit. Now, the main audience is over 50. It's old people who are still watching the news as their primary source. The younger generation are using social media and the internet and links from social media to find out more. So the conventional broadcasters and the conventional news organizations have to broaden their appeal and broaden the platforms on which they serve to accommodate everybody now. More people are being hired, so it's good for the industry. Some, though, are being reduced because of technology. Again, looking at Sky News, on the TV, you would have you'd have a presenter, 3 or 4 producers, and then a whole gallery of staff. Pardon me. You'd have a director, a director's assistant, the person who counts backwards, the vision mixer, the person who brings all the things on, producer. You'd have an auto cue. You'd have somebody operating the straps. You'd have a technical director. You'd have a lighting director. You'd have all these people. Now, because of modern technology and everything can be programmed on the computer, the gallery staff is just 3 strong. Whether it's better, we don't know. So, to answer your question, social media is good. Again, it has to be used sensibly, but conventional broadcasters are now using social media as a way to channel the viewers and the readers to the main site. Oh, got one, I think we go right at the back. Oh. Oopsie.
My question is, you started working on freedom of the press in 1975. It seems like you continue to work on similar
Well,
society as
freedom of press evolves, it changes. Because there are some things that you believe in the olden days should be worth fighting for, that you just think now it's not worth it. Now we have social media, we have citizen journalism, we still have conventional TV, we still have radio, we still have newspapers. The great thing about citizen journalism and social media is that it gets people thinking. The most important thing is to get people thinking for themselves. Sometimes social media is irresponsible. Sometimes they make stuff up. Sometimes it's an ego boost for the journalist or the writer, because they know they're going to get 50,000 clicks in one day. Which, is that the right thing to do? Well, you've always got to stimulate your mind. And I think if governments realised that if they reacted to some things, not necessarily just by going, no, that's true, but just having an open dialogue. They have regular meetings with journalists. They go to the press club and have a sit down over a cup of coffee. It can be off the record or it can be on the record. You need a dialogue, and that is what freedom of the press is all about. I think you've got to have concessions. You've always got to have concessions on both sides, because sometimes you don't go anywhere. If you're up against a brick wall, what's the point in trying to go further? You've got to find your way around the brick wall, or over it, or under it, or whatever. So you've got to find concessions. You've got to have an open dialogue with the government. And I think our man here is saying the TV is about to be turned off. So I think one more question. One more question. I saw somebody, here we go, there's a man right at the front. Hang on.
لدي سؤالين. السؤال الأول، بخبرتكم الكبيرة كيف ترى الوصول إلى الصحفي إلى كشف الحقائق مهمة ومثيرة أو تغطيات عصرية من خلال الوصول لهذا الأمر بطرق غير مهنية كصحفي، لك كصحفي سواء غير مهنية أو أخلاقية كما توجه السؤال. السؤال الثاني، هل ترى أن المؤسسات الكبرى الصحفية كمثل CNN أو BBC أو غيرها تخدم الصحفي وإن لم يكن محترفا إلى الوصول إلى يعني أماكن وشخصيات كبرى في الوصول منها إلى ما يخدمه كصحفي، بعكس الصحف أو المؤسسات الصغرى التي ربما تخذل الصحفي المحترف؟ أعيد السؤال الثاني، يعني هل ترى أن المؤسسات الكبرى ربما تخدم الصحفي وإن لم يكن محترفا إلى وصوله إلى كشف حقائق مثيرة وجديدة ونلقى شخصيات كبرى وأحداث كبرى، بعكس المؤسسات الصغرى التي ربما تخدم الصحفي وإن كان محترفا، إلا أنها لا تخدمه بحكم انتماء لهذه المؤسسات التي لا تمنح الوصول إلى هذه الأماكن وهذه الشخصيات. شكرا.
Thank you, Saud. I'm going to answer the second one first, if I may. From what I understand, do big organizations exclude the smaller person from working for them and revealing stories? The answer is, why would you want to work for a big organization? Because big organizations are great, they have power, but sometimes they lose agility. Sometimes you've got health and safety. The more people you have working for you in your organization, the more problems there will be. For example, many major organizations are very reluctant now to cover Daesh in northern Syria. The reason being, major organizations and their staff get picked up, they get kidnapped, some get killed in Syria. The reason they get picked up, kidnapped, killed, is for publicity for Daesh. And so big organizations steer away from it because large organizations are targeted by terror groups and by unethical people. If you're a smaller group or a smaller organization, a smaller TV, or what you do is you're freelance, you can do exactly the same thing as you can working for a large organization. But you can do even more because you're agile, you can sprint around, you can take risks. You've got to have a contract beforehand, so you're working for a large organization who will pay you a bit more because of the difficulties. But they will also put a clause saying we're not responsible for your well-being and your safety. So I'm afraid I disagree that smaller organizations or individuals don't have a voice. There are very many single journalists who go online and then get a reputation for their work as outstanding. They can get the exclusives, they can go here, they can go there. But they've got to build up months and years of trust, so they're not just a random person broadcasting fake news and saying, look, here I am in Aleppo, it's really dangerous here, when in actual fact they're in Amman. So that's the problem. I believe small organizations, individual journalists are good. But you do need larger organizations for the big story, the big explainer, the hour-long program, the week of themed broadcasts. Going to the first question, which I think was, how can I reconcile with doing what some believe to be unethical and exclusive coverage. Yes? Yeah? Ethics is subjective. What you believe is different from what I believe. What this region believes is different from the region where I come from believes. But also, there's nothing wrong with that because, you know, I was brought up a Catholic. I've had to compromise on certain issues. And so if you accept that different regions have different cultures, that's fine. And you can still get the exclusive interview because sometimes the ruler or the terrorist leader or the businessman or somebody who's amazing will want to talk to the media because they know that it's important that your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your wife, your children all get to hear about what they're doing. And we return to what we were saying earlier on, is yes, exclusive interviews are good. I've spoken to Assad, I've spoken to Gaddafi, Mubarak, King of Saudi Arabia. They're brilliant. But what we also said during the negotiations, we would be having the opposition to talk about what they had to say. So it's really important that even when you have an exclusive, you have somebody reacting to it. It's not just a platform for somebody to speak with a megaphone. Is that good? Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, lady over there.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Sabah. I'm from the Gulf University for Science and Technology from Kuwait. I was wondering how did the Gaddafi interview go? Because his death happened after the uprising that took place in Libya. I would like to know how was your reaction towards his death after your interview and what went on during that specific interview. Thank you.
The interview happened shortly after the release of Abu Basit al-Megrahi, the Pan Am bomber. So it was quite a few years ago. It was really weird, really weird. He didn't look at me in the eye. He looked about 6 inches above my head. I wasn't the interviewer, I was just the producer. We brought a presenter over because big interview, you've got to have a famous name because it massages everybody's ego and everybody's happy and the world's a wonderful place. The interview, we touched on nuclear weapons. Brilliant, because it was the time when Iran was meant to be creating the nuclear weapon. And he said, if Iran has a nuclear weapon, fine. Israel's got a nuclear weapon, fine. I believe the Palestinians should have a nuclear weapon. And which makes total sense, because if everybody had nuclear weapons, nobody would use them. We spoke about, there was a demonstration in London outside the Libyan embassy, and a policewoman, Yvonne Fletcher, was shot dead. We spoke about that. We spoke about the problems in Northern Ireland, and he drew comparisons between the friction between the Protestants and the Catholics in Northern Ireland with the problems in the Middle East, which is like amazing, but hey, he said it. So he was brilliant. Give him his due, and I got my photograph with my mother. Life is wonderful. Then there was a series of events which personally I didn't really understand. he was a nutcase. He was crazy, but we could control him. You know, the British government, the American government, we were flying in and out. Tony Blair was good friends. He would say outrageous things. We would laugh. And the government would be working behind the scenes, the Western governments would work behind the scenes and would manipulate him. Then something happened. And although I've read and I've understood what has been said, it seemed like he was being used as a scapegoat. I mean, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden he was demonized. He was the bad guy. He was getting blamed for everything. Whether he was or not, it doesn't matter. I believe that you should negotiate and negotiate and negotiate. Look what's happened to Afghanistan, look what's happened to Iraq, look what's happened to Libya, and look what would happen to Syria if Bashar al-Assad wasn't there, because there is no natural successor. When he died, I was really upset. Not because, you know, we'd grown friends, but I just thought the whole country is going to implode. I didn't like the way he was sexually humiliated, because I just don't think that's necessary. It was good it was reported, because people need to know these things. But yeah, I thought it was sad. The problems in Libya have spread out to Tunisia and Egypt. The whole of that little area, that micro area, is now unstable, which is very sad. I think that's it. Thank you very, very much for coming along, and thank you for coming so early as well. It was lovely to see you.